Did you know you don't, when you give a gift, you don't have to have God stand up and applaud you. You don't have to have the whole world know what you did. You don't have to have any recognition at all. That seed will go to work for you. God knows who sowed what, and God will make sure that you get your seed, your harvest, back into your hands. So it's important that we realize that, because there is a lag time. Most often when you give, there's a time between when you give and when you reap your harvest. Don't think that nothing is happening in that time. Don't think it's not working. It just blesses me that Jesus believes in this process so much so that He allowed this widow to give this offering. Now, you may not know my testimony very well. I've tried to tell it, parts of it throughout this program's history. But I married my wife. She was a widow. She had lost her husband in an automobile accident 4 years before we met. And so her testimony is in my book called Living with No Regrets. And it is really a powerful testimony of God's ability to heal a broken heart. So she went through the loss of her husband and her middle child. And 4 years she was a single mother. And we all happened to know, I knew of her and I knew her church, her pastor. And she got an insurance settlement when she lost her husband. It was a lump sum. And unbeknownst to anyone else, over that 4-year period, she gave and gave and gave, and ended up, when I got engaged to her, I thought she had a lot of money. And so I wanted to know what we're looking at here. She had 2 children that became mine. So we were going to become a new family. So I thought, now that we're engaged, I'll ask her, personal questions. I said, so how much money do you have? Well, it just so happened that at that point in her life, she had given it all away. I mean, she'd given it all away. Just like this widow in the Bible. And I was just shocked. So I went to God, because here we are, we're planning to get married, and I'm going to raise 2 kids. And I had just been making enough to support myself, and now I'm going to take on a wife and 2 kids. I thought she had some money that we could use to kind of get started. When I found out that she'd given all of her money away, I was surprised, shocked. I went to the Lord and I said, Lord, she gave all her money away. How am I going to do this? In fact, why? Why would you let her give all her money away? You just watched while this money could have helped me raise her kids, and could have helped me buy the things that we're going to have to buy in order to have a family. And yet you allowed her to give all that away. And He took me to this widow, and He reminded me of this scripture, that this poor widow gave all that she had away. And He told me little widows have been giving all their money away for a long time. He said, don't you get between me and those that want to sow into my kingdom. And He let me know for a fact that He would take care of sowers. He gives seed to the sower and bread for food. And so I saw this in a whole different light. I began to see that you don't understand many times what people are doing. And people who give to church and give to ministries are criticized by their relatives often. And they want to know, why do you give all that money to the church? What have they ever done for you? And why do you waste all that time down there? They don't realize, they don't understand sowing and reaping. And the Lord assured me that my wife and I, would reap a harvest on those seeds that she sowed. And it comes back in more ways than just money. My wife gave away money, all right, but she has things that money can't buy. For one thing, God put her family back together again. For another thing, He healed her broken heart. For another thing, He's given her ministry and called her into the ministry. And for another thing, He's allowed her, she writes all the checks, He's allowed her to give much more money away since we've been married than she did in the 4 years when she was a widow. So the harvest comes back like waves, like like in cycles, like a regular harvest, year in and year out. And so the saying is this, it's not a scripture, but it's this is a saying that I've heard: I will never regret giving something away that I could never keep to gain something that I could never lose. Not only are we reaping a harvest on the seeds that she's sown in this life, but she literally was laying up treasure in heaven. Those seeds and those gifts that we give on earth, they mean something in eternity. You are becoming rich toward God, which is exactly what Jesus said about the rich fool who built bigger barns so he could keep all of his wealth. And he said, now that I have all this wealth built up for many days, he said, I'm going to eat, drink, and be merry. And the Lord said, you know what? What if your soul is required of you this night? Then whose will those things be that you've stored up? He said, everyone's like that, who simply tries to gain wealth for themselves and for this life and is not rich toward God. I'll tell you, one of the things that make you rich toward God is giving. And when you give, whether it's small or great, your giving counts. Not only does it supply the needs down here of ministry, but it affects your reward in heaven. And you may not care much about that right now, but one day you will. One day it'll matter a lot. One day it'll mean more than anything you've ever done on the earth. And that's just one way to be rich toward God. I don't want to make you think that, God's only after your money. There are many, many ways to do things here on earth that matter in heaven. Giving is just one of them, but it is one way. And so I was really corrected by the Lord in the beginning of our marriage, because I have to be honest, it would have been a lot easier for me if she had kept half of that money. And we would have had it to pay for our expenses. But when the Lord showed me that and told me, don't you stand between him and widows, because they got a thing going here. I from that moment on, I never resented the gifts that she gave. I never resented the fact that we got married. We were both broke. There wasn't enough for me to be broke. She was broke. We were both broke, and there was nowhere to go but up. And people get criticized. They criticize the church, ministries like mine, all the time. I mean, I can't even go out in public. People, when they know what you do and who you are, they want to talk about, offerings and people giving and all of that. And I get a little bit tired of it. But we get criticized for accepting offerings from people, and nobody twists their arm, and nobody makes someone give to their ministry. Now, some use gimmicks and that I don't agree with, and methods and pressure that I don't agree with, but nobody makes them give. And it just reminds me of a time when a pastor friend, I was single at the time, and a pastor friend of mine, and I drove to Nevada. We had to go out there. We were going to meet a preacher out there. So we were driving to Nevada, and we got right over the border from Utah to Nevada, and there was a casino, and it was the only thing in that whole area. So we stopped there to get gas and get something to eat. And when we were leaving, this big old tour bus pulled up. I mean, one of those big, nice ones. Pulled right up to the front door, and the doors open, and out come all these little old ladies. And they're all going into this casino to gamble. And I guarantee you they're not all going to win. Most of them are going to lose their money in that casino. And I thought, where are all these critics criticizing widows and people for giving money to the gospel, to the ministry, and nobody says a thing in the world. In fact, somebody paid for that bus to send those widows, those little old ladies, to the casino so they could lose their money. And there's not a word said about that. Now, I'm not going to, that's none of my business, and I'm not mad or angry at anybody. I'm just saying it seems like a double standard when, people can go gamble their money away and everybody think that's fine. But boy, you send off a check to a preacher, and that's like some kind of crime.
Visit gregfritz.org to download the MP3s and watch the streaming video for free by entering code FREE at checkout.